Welcome, everyone, to Arcanum and Lore, an exploration of spoken word, poetry, music, and musings. This inaugural episode features original creative works by Rod Carlos Rodriguez, Tom Woodruff, Allie Cousins, Mike Reese, Chris Billings, Bridget Cooley, Charles Darnell, and Jeff Pettigrew. And featured famous poets this episode include Dylan Thomas, Anise Nin, Maya Angelou, Leonard Cohen, Roald Dahl, and Robert Frost. I'm your host, Jeff Pettigrew, and welcome to Arcanum and Lore. The Pecking Order. Something occurred to me in a post-hypnotic self-induced delirium. Orwell was right. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This was not an earth-shattering and utterly cataclysmic event at the time. Why? I was at the grocery store. Boil and bubble, toil and trouble, Shakespeare knows me very well. The rows and rows of all things, and all things being equal, it would be called food. But no, some are more equal than others. To my utmost surprise, time ground to a halt. Screaming babies in cart seats and the roaming juggernautal women moved about their gluttonous whims. The businessman in the business suit with his business look ogles the young and virulent checkout girls. And the manager, eagle-nosed and rabbit-toothed, eyes his kingdom like a snake. All is frozen in mid-motion. And from here it was explained to me the pecking order of all things under the fluorescent lights on the metal shelves and in the grocer's freezer. The most incredible thing. Life sprang forth from the shelves and began to walk around, laughing and talking among each other. The cereals reminded me of a woman's gossip group on a Sunday afternoon, chattering about nothing in particular. Contrary to popular opinion, the fruits and vegetables did mingle with each other, as if the entire produce department were a cocktail reception. The condiments stuck to themselves, thinking themselves better than the rest, their lids slightly angled towards the ceiling. The spices, little rich kids, spoiled and given whatever they want, did the same. Cleaning products are quite territorial, always chasing things away from their spotless aisle. The milks, they lived it up. They removed their labels, folding them neatly on the shelf, and chilled themselves au naturel in the open fridge. The frozens, here was a constant problem. Wars between these cool customers with cold personalities have plagued them since the invention of the freezer. Who deserves to be frozen? The lobsters, who were alive before this miraculous stoppage in the continuum of time, tried desperately to free the other seafood, to little or no avail. The fillets of fish, chilling so nicely before, now flop on the tile floor, deeply missing the rest of their bodies. The constant slap-slap of the fresh fish and the unnerving sight of single crab legs trying to walk again was too much for the lobsters. They set out in search of others for their revolution. One and the same, the bakery and a kindergarten playground. The raucous noise from the bagels was enough to drive the English muffins into a frenzy. A battle royale for breakfast supremacy ensued. That was until the desserts stepped in to mediate. Under the guise of United Non-Fat, or UN, the desserts implemented a policy of reduced consumption. Some, like the donuts, didn't believe. They formed their own organization called NAT-O, meaning small hole. The hotbed of activity in the bakery did not go unnoticed. The French breads kept stroking their long, shapely legs, much to the delight of the lunch meats. It was obvious how much the bread advances affected the meats. Sweat seeped from their bodies. This made the sliced breads, white and whole wheat, insanely jealous. It inevitably sent them running into the arms of another topping, the temperamental twins, peanut butter and jelly. The totalitarian state of the pharmacy, always independent of the rest of the grocery store, now made military advances with their superior numbers in small ammunition. Aisle after aisle fell to their iron will until the Battle of Pet Food Alley. The pet foods, under the dual leadership of Cat Chow and Dog Diet, fought them back. It was the pets' use of nanotechnology that turned the tides of war. The barrage of minuscule pellets was too much for the pharmaceuticals to bear. The paper products, upon hearing of the warring factions around the store, allied themselves with whomever they could. the papers strapped themselves to broom handles, one of the few member allies in what was called the Wood Treaties. This did not last long. At the first sign of aggression from the briquettes, the papers waved themselves in white flag surrender, leaving the brooms defenseless. Word quickly spread when one of the lunch meats, ham, defected. Shunning the sumptuous life with the manipulative and propaganda-driven cheeses and the French-bred seductions. The breakup of the ménage à trois sent shockwaves through the store. The toys, always considered an outsider, stepped into the limelight, which was provided by the limes, and jumped at the moment of disarray to assert their place in the hierarchy of the store. But the toys reached too far, trying to subvert the ability of the impulse items at the checkout counter to rule their domains effectively. This failed. The impulse items, sensing the threat, allied themselves with their cousins, the candies. Together they formed an unbreakable wall of defense that no one could Maginot around. They beat the toys back into submission, whom they exiled to the breakfast aisle forever to listen to the cereals and their jabbering. United Non-Fat felt this put too much power into the hands of the impulse items, with their alliance to the candies, a long-time UN enemy. But then something happened. The eggs, thus far obsessed with watching the milk's nude chill bathing, spoke up. The fragile and delicate voice of the eggs, with their don't ask, don't tell partners, the bacons, floated over the store. Ham, after his defection from the lunch meats and humiliating defeat at the hands of the potato chips when he tried to take over the snack-in-a-bag market, heard the pleas of the eggs. Almost immediately, Ham set about a careful plan. With doctors and cholesterol charts to prove it, he sentenced bacon to a quick death, claiming it was unsafe for consumption, the highest charge of criminality in the grocery store manifesto. With bacon out of the way and a split alliance with both the bagels and the English muffins, Ham proceeded to rape and pillage the eggs. Ham quickly made non-aggression pacts with the propaganda cheeses and made corporate deals with businesses outside the grocery store, most notably McDonald's and Burger King. This caused much chatter and much more arguing amongst the cereals as they saw the obvious threat. It was not until the Duke of Waffles and the King of Syrups united with the marriage of their two eldest siblings, Eggo and Maple, that a challenge was finally brought against Ham. But it would not be until the birth of their love child, Pop-Tart, that the ham monopoly was finally broken. The lobsters watched and waited, biding their time. They made few political moves around the store until the ambassador from the Union of Socialist Steak Republics, or USSR, came to them with a deal. The surf and turf treaty was perfect, as if made for one another. The steaks and lobsters prospered. The USSR, with its many republics, ground beef lean, rack of ribs, the runt nation butt steak, the leader filet mignon, and his right hand, New York strip, was a formidable force in the store. The unification of the steaks and lobsters terrified Chicana, the white meat capital. The chickens, aging and soft from their many years of absolute rule over all meats, found themselves in serious trouble. They quickly enlisted the support of pork, the renegade other white meat faction. Together with turkey, who was already at war with ground beef lean, was an obvious friend to the cause. The wines, up until now silent, suddenly erupted in civil war, white against red. The whites, secretly supported by the chicken-pork-turkey front, took a bunch of early victories. But the reds, aided by the steaks and their heavy oaken morale, soon drove them back. It was then that the cash registers intervened. They called an all-department summit and a non-aggression ceasefire. There they slowly explained that if all of them did not return to their place and stop all this foolishness, they would go on strike. All the items, from the fruits to the steaks, cereals to seafood, were shocked. They knew what that meant. If they stopped working, then nothing would be sold and they would all die of unuse. They gasped, "Expire." Their pecking order meant nothing without the dependable and tireless efforts of the cash registers, and that was now in serious jeopardy. "The decision is yours," the registers said. Some of them were terrified, those who would expire quickly. The milks, now fully labeled again, pleaded with the others, as did the steaks and chickens, for once united in a common goal. The fruits and vegetables huddled together in the corner, praying. It was now that the canned good appeared for the first time, regal and pompous. A long procession filed past all the others, up to the registers. "We have watched all of this with quiet reservation," the Can Emperor said. "I suggest you let them expire. Teach them a lesson about the fragile balances of this store." He spoke to the masses of food gathered before him. "I have been here a long, long time, and I will be here for many years to come." He rubbed the large dent in his side. "You must learn the laws and limits of this store, for it is the only one you will ever know." An assassin's bullet from one of the lobsters thrust the entire store into war. Blood dripped from the Can Emperor. As he died, he said, "I know the pecking order, and the secret dies with me. I have seen it with my own eyes. I was returned within the proper number of days with a valid receipt. I know the pecking order." He died. All the foods were silent for a moment, then war consumed them again. The continuum of time flicked again, and everything was back to normal. The overly fat women pushed the screaming children through the aisles. Suddenly, every item on every shelf and in every fridge and every freezer fell to the floor. They did not move again. The people looked in awe and ran screaming from this haunted grocery store. Groceries of all kinds, shapes, and colors were tossed into the trunks of cars in the parking lot. Only the breads and eggs rode up front with the people. Two things. I guess now we know the pecking order, and you'll never look at a grocery store quite the same again.
That was The Pecking Order by Jeff Pettigrew.
My Hero Bears His Nerves by Dylan Thomas. My hero bears his nerves along my wrist, that rules from wrist to shoulder, unpacks the head that, like a sleepy ghost, leans on my mortal ruler, the proud spine spurning turn and twist. And these poor nerves so wired to the skull ache on the love-lorn paper. I hug to love with my unruly scrawl, that utters all love hunger, and tells the page the empty ill. My hero bears my side and sees his heart tread like a naked Venus, the beach of flesh, and wind her blood-red plate. Stripping my loin of promise, he promises a secret heat. He holds the wire from the box of nerves, praising the mortal error of birth and death, the two sad knaves of thieves and hunger's emperor. He pulls the chain, the cistern moves. That was My Hero Bears His Nerves by Dylan Thomas, one of my absolute favorite poems.
Pilgrimage by Spirit Tom. By chance, in Scotland, a single sign fined horn. We drove there to sit in the Caddy Gardens, and in the hall where Kangaroo Moon played, all bright and blessed, right next to Windscale Nuclear Power Station. Same as Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain, used for British tank war exercises. Wonderful Welsh valleys, used for Harrier jump jet practice. While in Scotland, sought out the Sinclair Chapel, older than the New World, with images of the Green Man in every corner, as well as images of that murdered apprentice. Sat in writers' chairs for inspiration Dickens, Wordsworth, O. Henry. Visited writers' towers, Joyce in Dublin, Yeats in Connemara. Walked to the grave of Ossian the Bard, with a 360-degree view of Northern Ireland. Drank a Guinness on Galway Bay, sat among crop circles in Wiltshire. Hugged the stones of Avebury. Entered the Man Altol in Madron. Visited churches, abbeys, cathedrals of ley-line significance. Always searching for significance, often finding areas of darkness. Like the shattered genitals of non-fig-leaf sculptures in the Vatican. And you, in Nuremberg, among the stadiums, temples of mass hypnotism, might also recall how the Nuremberg tribunals were held in that same town. Darkness and light are married. It is a dynamic relationship. Abuse of the sacred is everywhere. Look at our environment. but believers still want to believe. Me? I would rather live for a reason than ever die for a cause. This is Stillness by Michael Reese. Fantastic quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. Do you know the terror of he who falls asleep? To the very toes he is terrified, because the ground gives way under him, and the dream begins.
Next up we have Weeds and Manifest Destiny by Rod Carlos Rodriguez. Here the weeds remained drought-resistant, favored by gardeners and horticulturalists alike. They sprouted and spread in confident masses that choked productive plants like the tomato, the squash, or even the prized eggplant. These marauding weeds had invaded and killed off entire farms of corn, and tasty cilantro for no other reason than manifest destiny. But now these weeds feel threatened by weed-resistant artichokes or bold, self-determining potatoes, growing without permission of the weed majority. How dare these plants regain agency and stand up to the dominant unproductive crabgrass or ragweed? Who gave permission for cucumbers to propagate to such enormous sizes? Bananas have decided to be all uppity by uprooting institutionalized poison sumac in superior percentages alone. Even more worrisome, clover leaf and dandelions are openly consorting with lettuce leaves, all varieties, and figs. Who will stop this mixing of species? How can we prevent this unholy evolution from continuing to invade our pure weed race? That was by Rod Carlos Rodriguez, a close friend of the show, close friend of mine. I hope you enjoyed that. That is Weeds and Manifest Destiny. Risk. And then the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. All right, that's Anais Nin. That is a poem called Risk. Sitting in the park, watching ducks, reading Taylor Malley. I mean, I was reading Taylor Malley, not the ducks. The ducks were doing duck things, like swimming in the river, watching people on the banks ready to race each other for bits of food thrown in the water. The ducks, I mean, not the people. The people were tossing the food, and I was watching the ducks while reading Taylor Malley. Being amused at the ducks' antics, not Mr. Malley. He wasn't there, just his book. I was amused at the ducks' antics and at the couple clucking their tongues and snapping their fingers, trying to get the ducks and geese to come to them, as if they were dogs, which of course they weren't, so of course they didn't. But it wasn't for lack of trying on the couple's part. I also noticed that ducks don't share food. They actually chase the lucky duck who gets the food first, then has to eat on the run, or rather on the swim, or risk losing the piece of food. There was also an odd duck pair, a large male Muscovy and a female mallard, hanging out together, and when a female Muscovy waddled by, the mallard charged her, chasing her away while the Muscovy proudly shook his tail feathers, before he and the mallard flew away together. I looked at the 4 or 5 male mallards in the water and asked them what the Muscovy had that they didn't, and wondered whether or not ducks mate with ducks of other breeds. When Taylor Malley called to me, metaphorically of course, because he wasn't there, just his book, to leave the ducks alone and get back to his poetry. So I did. Until it was time to go, and as I started walking down the path, I noticed the female Muscovy looking at me a little bit funny. So that is Chris Billings, and definitely a lot of fun he's having there with that poem. That is called Sitting in the Park Watching Ducks, reading Taylor Malley. Next up we have I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the singing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, but his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
All right, next up we have Shadow Trees by Chris Billings. There used to be trees on the bushy plains in the rolling hill country. There used to be wildlife, too, in abundance. There were nomadic Apache and Comanche and the occasional settler rolling through. Then there were more settlers. Wagon trails cut through the plains, chopped up the hills. Towns were founded, more settlers settled. The Apache and Comanche driven from their home along the creeks. The wildlife, too, driven back. The hills now farmland and ranchland. Towns sprung up in numbers. Their populations grew rapidly. Train tracks laid, then the automobile. Farms gave way to industry. Towns became cities. The rolling hills became crisscrossed with highways and byways to faraway destinations, local tourist attractions, the wildlife driven away. The bushy plains, the rolling hills, now just regions, patchwork lines drawn on a map. Civilization with its civil citizens populate where the coyote once roamed. Metropolises overshadow the creeks, distort the horizons of the plains and hills. There used to be trees here. If you happen by at just the right moment, you can see their ghosts like shadows silhouetted on warehouse walls. In case you don't remember, lest you forget. Up next we have Sublime Sabotage by Jeff Pettigrew.
Evening flow like jellyfish dance across a crowded room. Drinks in clawed fist shave the light as it fades too soon. The perfect glance from a total stranger with a hint of perfume. Subtle mix of words entice the will to walk the future's kaleidoscopic moon. Next up, we have a beautiful instrumental piece by Ali Cousins called Forgotten Mists. Lazarus. Ah, Jesus, you do me no favors. You give me life, but not my life. You raise me up. What am I to do? You are borne away with the crowd, shouting, Hosannas, as the retreating tide pulls pebbles from the shore. I am like shells on the sand, empty, hard husk, standing out for the curious. But I shall not be picked up by wandering hands. Those who know me, loved me, know me not now. I am not the phoenix reborn with youth and soaring strength, only Lazarus, already tottering to my second tomb. Those who loved me wept with joy with my return. How soon before the sidelong glances reveal the recollection that those little sins they know, I know, were resurrected too. How soon before the happy embrace is replaced,
by distance carefully maintained, as if the death stink was still on me. I see my future years ahead, this unnatural soul moving alone through my unnatural days. My God, why have you forsaken me? John 11, 1-44. That is Lazarus by Charles Darnell. The Pig by Roald Dahl. In England once there lived a wonderfully clever pig. To everybody it was plain that Piggy had a massive brain. He worked out sums inside his head. There was no book he hadn't read. He knew what made an airplane fly. He knew how engines worked and why. He knew all this, but in the end, one question drove him round the bend. He simply couldn't puzzle out what life was really all about. What was the reason for his birth? Why was he placed upon this earth? His giant brain went round and round, alas, no answer could be found. Till suddenly one wondrous night, all in a flash he saw the light. He jumped up like a ballet dancer and yelled, "By gum, I've got the answer. They want my bacon slice by slice to sell at a tremendous price. They want my tender juicy chops to put in all the butcher's shops. They want my pork to make a roast, and that's the part'll cost the most. They want my sausages in strings, they even want my chitterlings. The butcher's shop, the carving knife, this is the reason for my life. Such thoughts as these are not designed to give a pig great peace of mind. Next morning, in comes Farmer Bland, a pail of pig swill in his hand. And Piggy, with a mighty roar, bashes the farmer to the floor. Now comes the rather grisly bit, so let's not make too much of it, except that you must understand that Piggy did eat Farmer Bland. He ate him up from head to toe, chewing the pieces nice and slow. It took an hour to reach the feet, because there was so much meat. And when he finished, Pig, of course, felt absolutely no remorse. Slowly he scratched his brainy head, and with a little smile he said, "I had a fairly powerful hunch that he might have me for his lunch. And so, because I feared the worst, I thought I'd better eat him first." That is The Pig by Roald Dahl. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Up next we have a submission by Bridget Cooley called As It Ends. Your hugs last a little longer, my kisses linger at your lips, as we embrace the ritual, knowing this is it. We prepare romantic dinners, leave wine unfinished by the door. With a quiet understanding, we both would stay for more. Every word becomes I love you. We pull the covers over our heads, and I try to memorize how it feels sleeping in your bed. Some might call it tragic, the way we wade towards the end. You call it a page turn. I call you my best friend. It's not that the book is over, it's just a chapter or two. I trace the scars on your shoulder. You hold me close to you. We forget what time it is. Let love simmer on low heat, as we prepare our white flags that symbolize defeat. But once the story's over, and we've gone our separate ways, it's the slow burn I'll remember, our happy dying days. Thank you very much. Bridget Cooley there. Thank you. Tonight we are exploring two versions of Leonard Cohen's amazing piece, Everybody Knows. First I'll be reading it in spoken word form, and then we'll follow that by hearing the song sung by the legend himself. So here it is, Everybody Knows by Leonard Cohen.
Everybody knows the dice are loaded. Everybody rolls with their fingers crossed. Everybody knows the war is over. Everybody knows the good guys lost. Everybody knows the fight was fixed. The poor stay poor, the rich get rich. That's how it goes. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that the boat is leaking. Everybody knows that the captain lied. Everybody got this broken feeling like their father or their dog just died. Everybody talking to their pockets. Everybody wants a box of chocolates and a long-stemmed rose. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that you love me, baby. Everybody knows that you really do. Everybody knows that you've been faithful. Give or take a night or two. Everybody knows that you've been discreet. But there were so many people you just had to meet without their clothes, and everybody knows. Everybody knows that's how it goes. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that's how it goes. Everybody knows. And everybody knows that it's now or never. Everybody knows that it's me or you. And everybody knows that you live forever. When you've done a line or two. Everybody knows the deal is rotten. Old Black Joe's still picking cotton. For your ribbons and bows, and everybody knows. And everybody knows that the plague is coming. Everybody knows that it's moving fast. Everybody knows that the naked man or woman are just a shining artifact of the past. Everybody knows the scene is dead. But there's going to be a meter on your bed that will disclose what everybody knows. And everybody knows that you're in trouble. Everybody knows that what you've been through. From the bloody cross on top of cavalry to the beach of Malibu. Everybody knows it's coming apart. Take one last look at this sacred heart before it blows, and everybody knows. Everybody knows that's how it goes. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that's how it goes. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that's how it goes. Everybody knows. Everybody knows.
And that concludes our first episode of Arcanum and Lore, an exploration of spoken word, poetry, music, and musings. I'd like to thank our special contributors this week, Rod Carlos Rodriguez, Tom Woodruff, Mike Reese, Chris Billings, Allie Cousins, Charles Darnell, Bridget Cooley, and myself, Jeff Pettigrew. The featured famous poets for this episode were Dylan Thomas, Anise Nin, Maya Angelou, Leonard Cohen, Roald Dahl, and Robert Frost. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to another episode coming soon.